I decided to do another episode of this because I felt it was important to share my story. And I'm super excited to get into more of this topic around unaffordable housing and the housing crisis in the US. So, first off, who am I? So, most of you know me as Charisma Jones, and you follow my YouTube channel. I was based on the internet where I make crazy videos about churches and I do a few vlogs and different things, some kind of content. But I'm also a community organizer, and I work right now specifically pushing for more affordable housing in the Central Ohio area. This has been really important to me because I know it's been impacting thousands and thousands of people, some of whom I know, and others who have come to know or heard their stories, and it is ridiculous. I was just reading an article today, actually, where I was looking at how the journalist was comparing that housing shortages and the high cost of housing is also related to wages because housing has skyrocketed in terms of mortgages and rents. However, wages have basically remained stagnant. So you might hear some professionals and even decision makers saying, well, if we just paid people more, maybe we wouldn't have this crisis. However, I also heard a developer say, well, one reason why we charge as much as we do, especially when it relates to apartments and rent, is because we can. What? So if capitalism allows for this to continue to happen, how can people ever feel like they have a chance? So another reason why I decided to start this podcast. So hopefully you caught the first episode where I met with Lennon Sweeney, who's a professional who's been studying this area for years and years and years and has personal experience as well. Today, I wanted to share more of my story. If you haven't already read the blog post on charismajones.com, it's entitled I'm Homeless. Don't worry, I'll drop the link in the description box, but I'll also share a little bit of a snapshot here. So how my journey began was actually several years ago, 2015. My roommate and I were living in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment with a garage, I must say, and must add. And it was only $600 a month. Very, very affordable. Later that year, our apartment community underwent what a lot of apartment communities go through when new property managers come in. So at that point, they gave us two options. They said you can either move to a renovated unit and pay more, or you can move out of the complex. So we apparently had been living under a rock and had not realized that all of the other apartments that were comparable and nearby, their rent had already gone up. So our rent went up by $250 a month, and we ended up staying because we couldn't find anything else that was comparable and less expensive than the rent hike. So, 2015 goes by. A few years later, we get new property managers. So you know what happens? The rent went up again. At this point, we still continue to live in the same community because we felt like, where else will we go? Now, I want to make sure that you know that it wasn't like our jobs increased our salaries. That didn't happen. So our rent had gone from $600 a month to $850, and then later it went up to over $1,000 a month. Now, the interesting thing to me in this whole scenario is that because we had lived in that apartment community for so long, our rent didn't go up as much as it was for people who were brand new moving to the complex. So in conversations with neighbors, because at one point I looked at starting a tenants union or some sort of tenants association for my apartment community, I was asking people, well, how much is your rent for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment? Forget the garage. Their rent was already $1,300 a month. And I said, oh my goodness. So the handwriting was on the wall, right? You could see it coming down the pipeline that if we continue to stay in that community, our rent was also going to go up. So in 2022, when the lease renewals came out, the rent had really, really gone up for us. And so my roommate at that time, because I had a different roommate by then, she decided to move back with family because of lots of different reasons. So she moved back out of state. I decided that I would just buy a house because I thought, well, I don't want to even get a new roommate at this point because even my half by that point would be the cost of someone's mortgage. So I decided it was time to start looking for a house. So I tried to get my financial portfolio together, if you will. I had already chosen a realtor. I met with my realtor and we started my housing search in terms of house search. And in April of 2023, I found my first house where my offer was accepted. This baby, I was elated, right? However, it was a house that had been flipped. And so in the home inspection, that's where everything fell apart. So I decided to terminate that contract and continue my search because I had found that particular house within 2 weeks of looking at houses. Now, between April and 2023 into present day, which is September 2023, I have also placed an offer that was accepted on a second house, which was also a flip. And again, similar situation, everything fell apart in the home inspection. I terminated the contract. Now, in between April and September, I found dozens and dozens of houses that I really liked, right? Went to the showing, told my realtor all about, how I could see like, oh, I can host a cookout back here. My nieces and nephews, when they come visit, they'll probably take this room here. But I was outbid on every single offer that I submitted. It was so bad that at one point, one house that I looked at, y'all, it didn't even have air conditioning. And I bid $14,000 over the asking price. And somebody walked in with a cash offer. With conditions like that, how can you be set up to win? And the saddest part of this whole story, in my opinion, is that I'm not the only one going through this crisis. So in that time, while I was continuing to look for a house, my lease had ended. So I started couch surfing. I was staying with different families that I knew, and I even was a dog sitter at one point, and I hadn't planned to stay at the house initially, but by that point, with me not having a place to live, I also ended up house sitting. And it dawned on me in that moment that according to all the research that I had done as a community organizer who works to push for people to get into more affordable housing, that based on the couch surfing that I was doing, I was homeless, according to the definition, because I didn't have a permanent address, was homeless. And so I started to look up some of the other terms that are used for people who are unhoused, but not necessarily people who are sleeping on the streets, but are in a position where if you ask them what their address was, they really couldn't answer. And the term that I stumbled upon was houseless. And that's how we got the name of this podcast, Houseless. Auntie on the air mattress, because I'm an auntie. And yeah, I do have an air mattress. It travels well with me. So that's how I ended up starting this podcast. Now, my financial advisor gave me some words that really helped me to feel like, well, maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself with this journey, because as a person who's very driven and ambitious, this has taken a toll on me. But not only because of that, but because of the instability of not knowing from week to week where I would lay my head. And now I'm renting a room in a house. And my financial advisor when I met with him recently said, listen, let's put this into perspective. He said, I read something the other day that noted that this is the toughest time in US history to buy a house. So it's not just you. Don't be so hard on yourself. Now, maybe that gives some consolation to some people. And it made me feel slightly better in that moment. However, it made me more angry because it's not just the toughest time for me, it's the toughest time for lots of people. I've also heard this same story from people who are millennials like myself, who are trying to buy their first house. Maybe they're single, maybe they're married, maybe they have kids. Also, I've heard it from people who are baby boomers and they're trying to downsize. And so another piece of the market that's happening is that baby boomers and millennials, and some like other people who are not millennials as well, are clashing because we're both competing for what would be considered starter homes. So we're both looking at these smaller homes. Baby boomers, though, typically have more money. They've been in the game longer, they've been able to save. Maybe, if they did have another house or they are in another house right now, they haven't sold it, they can sell their house. Listen, they're going to be ahead of the game. So there's this competition that's happening. Again, though, toughest time in US history to buy a house. Because it's not like people my parents' age weren't looking for houses as people around my age before. It's just tougher now. So, what do I hope to accomplish with this series of podcast episodes? Well, I want to do at least 10 of these. And what you'll hear is stories from me. And sometimes you'll also see me doing an interview with someone else who either works in the field of housing or has had a story where they've been impacted by the housing crisis. So you get a little bit of both of those. And this 10 episode journey will basically have episodes once or twice a month. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Also turn on the notifications so that you won't miss the episodes. And if you're interested in weighing in on the conversation, definitely type your comments in the chat so that I can read and respond. Because I know that, unfortunately, this is happening to too many of us. So like the video, comment, share it with other people, and join the conversation.